Hello, fifth grade. Welcome after spring break. Woo! You guys are restful and ready to get into one of the best parts, I said I think every lesson, of our history of the United States, which is the lead up to the American Revolution. Right, go, go, go. Um, so, what we just finished talking about were the colonies. Now, you picked colonies. There were reasons why people came to the colonies. It was a new life, right? The colonies were content, living large. They didn't have to worry about Britain. They paid them some money every now and again. They had the British soldiers protecting them from the Spain, having them fight any issues or conflicts with the natives. Life was good. Then we get to now the last colony was Georgia, and that was formed around 1732. So for about like that 20, 30 years, until around the 50s or 1750s, 1760s, everything's calm and good. And then, the colonies who had been around longer, they just prosper and they become cities and they become these great towns. Borders get bigger. They push, more people come. They push more inward, which leads to conflict with the Native Americans. That is the first piece of our tensions, right? And we know that in the upper part of our colonial map, we had parts of France that had the areas up in the northeast of the United States. And so that's where tension begins. And it just leads to a downward spiral for about 20, 30 years until we actually become the United States of America and we're freed from British rule. So what you need in your binder is your chapter 10, Tensions. It's a little blurry. There it is. Tensions Grow. We are going to go through and we're going to go through some of the vocabulary. I have this broken up between like 4 lessons, and then we're going to start working on an American Revolution timeline. And we're going to be working on this timeline for probably like almost a month, because there are just so many events that build up, and it's good to see who's winning when and who's winning and who's losing, right? Like when do the British have the advancements? When do the colonists or the Union, right, build their forces? And so it's interesting to see that, and you see that through a timeline. I mean, there's so many events that happen, and it's so important right now. You get into this also in 8th grade, you'll kind of get like a big repeat of history again, and you can be like, oh, we learned that in 5th grade. I remember Mrs. Ermini or Miss Grimm or Miss Hanson or Miss Gorman telling me about that. So just remember, you get it first in 5th grade. But it's just really important to know, how does the United States get formed? How do we become the United States of America? And what were the reasons that led up to it? Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So take out your stuff and we're going to start reading. In the early 1700s, the colonists were content with the rule of Great Britain and the British king. However, their feelings would change. In this lesson, you'll learn about the great events that shifted how the colonists felt about Great Britain and the king. During the 1750s and 1760s, Great Britain and the colonists joined forces against the French during the French and Indian War. Although the Britain won, the war left them with huge debts and a new lands to protect in North America. To solve its problems, the British government passed a number of laws. Some of these laws ordered the colonists to pay new taxes. These new taxes angered the colonists because they had no representatives in the British government, which is called Parliament, to vote on these laws. Great Britain believed that it had the right to create laws and taxes that affected the colonists. After all, it created the colonies, and the colonies, however, disagreed. Many colonists began to object the British rule because of these new laws and taxes. The colonists grew more and more frustrated with Great Britain. Eventually, the frustration began to turn into protests against the British soldiers. Some people have compared Great Britain and the colonies as a parent and a child. A comparison is called a metaphor. As you can read this lesson, think about how Great Britain is the parent and how the colonies are like growing children. All right, think of like preteens and prepubescents. And this is a nice drawing of the Boston Tea Party, them hurling tea over the boats of Boston Harbor. All right, so we have all our vocabulary. We're going to break this up between the next 3 lessons. So the French and Indian War. All right, so I'm going to read it, and then we'll go back through. And in our packet, we are looking for what is the purpose, like why did the French and Indian War happen, and then what were its effects, okay? It's kind of like a cause and effect relationship. We do this in language arts. In social studies, this is the best way to learn cause and effect, right? Few things happen, and it leads to something else that occurs. And the American Revolution and the events leading up to it is a great example of cause and effect. During the 1600s and 1700s, Great Britain, France, and Spain often fought one another to gain lands. They clashed in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. In North America, Great Britain and France both claimed the Ohio River Valley. British settlers wanted to farm the rich soil there, and the French wanted to trap beavers and trade the furs. Great Britain and France could not agree about which country should control these lands. In 1754, the contest over land along the Ohio River became a war that lasted almost 10 years. Thousands of British soldiers, along with many colonists, fought against the French. Because many American Indians tribes were allies with the French, the British colonists called the conflict the French and Indian War. Other American native tribes, however, fought along the British. During the beginning of the French and Indian War, Great Britain lost many battles. However, things changed in 1759 when British troops captured Quebec City in Canada. In 1760, the French had lost control of Canada. Finally, in 1763, the French surrendered to the British. Under the terms of the peace agreement in 1763, France gave up its land claims in present-day Canada to Great Britain. The British also won land between the Mississippi River and the Appalachian Mountains. Although the war gave British more land, it also created huge problems for them. Most of it left Great Britain with debts or unpaid bills. The British national debt had almost doubled by the end of the war. So, let's go back through and let's list the 3 reasons of why it happened and its effects, right? So the 3 reasons were up here, why they were fighting over the Ohio River Valley. So, what was the purpose? They fought over the Ohio River Valley. Britain wanted fertile farmland. French wanted the fur trade. The natives fought with both sides. Britain got land, but it had huge debts after the war. France gave up their land claims in Canada. Britain got American land, which stretched between, B/W is shorthand for between, the Mississippi and the Appalachian Mountains. Now, as we continue to do our American Revolution study, we are also going to be starting geography and learning our states and capitals by region. So when we map out the mountains and the rivers, we will see where everything's in the United States, and kind of you get a better idea of where things are. And then you get to work on your state report. Fun ahead. All right, so let's move on to the Proclamation of 1763. Now, a proclamation is one of our vocabulary words. So a proclamation is a public announcement. Public announcement. Proclamation. So let's see what the proclamation that Britain gives to the colonists. After the French and Indian War, many British settlers moved west, right? Because they now had more land, so they moved westward. They built homes on the land that Great Britain had won from the French. However, American natives feared that this movement of people would destroy their way of life. Some American natives tried to drive the settlers away by attacking their homes and the British forts. By the time the fighting ended, nearly 2,000 settlers, soldiers, and traders had died. To stop the attacks and to protect the colonists, Great Britain announced a law called the Proclamation of 1763. The proclamation declared that American natives could have as much of the land west of the Appalachian Mountains, and it also said that settlers could not move to these areas. The colonists disliked this law because they did not like the way in which Great Britain was trying to control the colonies. Many colonists simply ignored the law and moved west. All right, so they wanted to go past the mountains, and Britain was trying to make peace with the natives, saying, okay, we won't go past the mountainside. You could have everything to the left, to the west of the mountains. So here we are. Great map. Perfect. So after the French and Indian War, Britain controls all of this. I mean, between Britain, the French Spain still has a large stronghold. But France pretty much gives up their American stronghold. And then this is, like the Alaskan area up north. So here are 13 colonies. And this red line is the kind of like the Appalachian Mountain range. Okay. Oh, France does have a little bit. They still have the Indies, right? Okay, so 1763. So let's go through and find our reasons. So what is our purpose? So the purpose was the British settlers moved west in the new land that opened up after the French and Indian War. Natives tried to drive settlers away by attacking their homes and forts. Okay, so they're attacking British forts and battles and soldiers, so they have to intervene. And many settlers and soldiers were perished or passed away. So what happened of it? The outcome was that British told the natives that they could have the land west of the Appalachian Mountains. Colonists disliked and refused to obey this because they thought that the British government was starting to become too controlling. All right, and so that's a big issue when they start to become too controlling, when they've had so many years of being able to do what they want and have their own governments and have their own thing. So now, because there's more land and there's more tension with the natives, Britain brings in more soldiers, right, onto this new land to protect it, and that lands to another area of tension. All right, the Quartering Act. Sorry, I'm jumping the gun. We're going to do this one. Oops, we'll save this for the next lesson. All right, so we are going to end it there today.